Hello, today I'm going to be making a different kind of Valorant video, and this one is going to be getting better at the game. I've been requested to make this kind of video, and I would like to break it down into 4 different parts. Firstly, I will talk about getting the most optimal settings and talking about some of the best hardware you can get to get better at Valorant. Secondly, I'll be talking about aim training and a few tips I have to improve with that. Next is going to be about game sense and how you can improve with that. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about how you can actually improve and climb ranks. Currently, I am a Diamond 2, and hopefully you can learn something from this video. So firstly, we'll be going over settings and hardware. And for that, I'll just go into my settings. This is on my account. And I'll just be going through like all the important settings that you need, or not need, but like are preferable over others. First one, enemy highlight color. I like having mine on yellow. It helps the enemies pop out more to me, and it just helps to like see enemies. Maybe if you only see a little bit of their head. I just have mine on yellow. It's a preference, but yellow is my preference. Sensitivity, it is hard to gauge, but I recommend having a lower sensitivity. It all really depends. I can't just say like 0.6 perfect sense. You need to find like a good sense for yourself, but I recommend if you're struggling with aim, I'd say try lowering it because it helps you control your aim more. And you also, I can't really tell you a perfect sense because you need to know your DPI. So, and yeah, so you can't really know a perfect sense, but you should just test out some new stuff if your aim's not very good. Scope sensitivity multiplier, have this at 1, don't change that. And everything else is all preference. I do have corpses blood off because it helps with frame problems if you're having problems with frames, but I don't really have problems with frames anymore, but this is also a preference. You can have that on or off. Controls, I have this all on default, but I have crouch on C, and that's just because when I started playing Valorant, I came from other games that had C as crouch, so I just put that as crouch on C, and then I put the ability on with control. That's also a preference, doesn't really matter. Crosshair is pretty important, but also preference. Color of the crosshair, a lot of people use white, cyan, some people use like yellow. I like using cyan, that's just preference. Inner lines, I have 1, 4, 1, 1. You can have like 3, 4. A lot of people have some different crosshairs like dot crosshairs. I have outlines off, and I have no outlines. You should never have outlines. That's one thing. And you should also have a static crosshair, not one that moves around, like no movement error or anything. For video settings, display mode, you should always have this on full screen. If you don't have it on full screen, you do lower your frames, so I don't recommend doing that. But yeah, you should always have this on full screen. That's just my opinion, but it does help with frames a lot if you're having trouble with that. You should always, or I always have this on 1920 by 1080. It's the best graphics, but if you do have frame problems, you could try lowering this. It does make the game look a little bit worse, but if you do want more frames, you could try making this lower, but I just have it on that. Graphics quality is pretty important because it can control how many frames you get. I recommend, well, you should always have multi-threaded rendering on. If you want to get the most frames as possible, turn everything on low, turn this on none, turn this on 1, and then turn everything off. But if you don't struggle with frames too much, you can like change it whatever you want. But yeah, I say like everything here, it's like if you don't struggle with frames, it's all preference. But if you just struggle with frames, I recommend lowering everything to low. Stats, I just have client FPS, text only, pack show both. This is just preference. I just want to see what my frames are and see what the pack is. And audio, there's enable HRTF. I didn't really find it too big of a difference between no HRTF and HRTF on, but I just have it on anyway. You can try it if it helps you. I recommend having this setting on because it mutes the music if you have the music on. This is just all preference, and this is also just preference. So next, we're going to talk about hardware, and I say about hardware, you should have a good, the priorities go from a good computer to a good monitor, then I'd say good keyboard and mouse. Like those are, I'd say, like the 3 most important things. And gaming desk is, I mean, I don't really struggle with that, but I say getting a good computer to get like the most frames, and getting a good monitor to match that. Like you need if you have higher frames and you have a low hertz monitor, you won't really feel like you have high frames. You need to have a high frame count and you also need to have a high hertz count to match the frame count. Like having 60 frames is actually a lot, or having 60 hertz is a lot different from having 144 hertz, especially if you're getting like 144 frames. You'll feel a big difference if you do that. Next is getting better at aiming in Valorant. The majority of the aim in Valorant is actually called crosshair placement. Crosshair placement is when you keep your crosshair at the enemy head's level at all times. This helps when you peek at the enemy or the enemy peeks at you because your crosshair will already be aimed at their head when you make contact with the enemy. This should allow you to get headshots much more easily rather than aiming at the floor and making a crazy flick to their head. Although good crosshair placement does help, you also need to have good aim fundamentals like tracking and flicking. You can practice these in the Valorant range or deathmatch. There are also some third-party aim trainers that I use to get better at Valorant, like Aim Labs and Kovacs. Aim Labs is free on Steam and is a good way to train your aim and get better. Kovacs costs $10 on Steam, but also allows for more customization to train your aim. Both are good options to get if you're interested in getting better at aim fundamentals. If you don't want to get any of those apps, you can still get better by practicing your aim in Valorant. In the range, you want to practice flicking to the bots' heads, and you could try all the modes in the range. I always go into the range before playing a competitive game in order to get my aim trained and ready. You can also go into a deathmatch, but remember, the goal of deathmatch isn't to win, but to train your aim. Getting first place in deathmatch while using Odins and judges isn't going to improve your aim. You should try using either the Vandal or Guardian and try hitting headshots. This will definitely help your aim and force you to aim for the head instead of the body. Game sense is the next important aspect of Valorant that is important to get down. Game sense isn't like aim where you can just train for hours. It's more like something you have to develop over time. I'd say one of the best ways to get better at game sense is watching pro matches and pro players play, because they have a lot of tactics and they do in their game, and you can implement some of them into your own games. You can also watch like what kind of angles you should hold in Valorant. I recommend trying to hold angles that are called off angles, which means angles that isn't a place where many people check. For example, when attacking on bind, most people check hard left cubby on A short. Instead of going into the corner and getting pre-fired by the enemy, you can hold an off angle and play somewhere to the left of the corner, and that way you won't be pre-fired and you can surprise the enemy. This is a good tactic to go by, and you shouldn't hold common angles too often or else the enemy may pre-fire you and you won't be able to do anything about it. Overall, game sense is very important in Valorant, and you do need to develop it over a long span of time instead of just a few weeks. Lastly, I'm going to be giving tips to climb ranks in Valorant. I recommend for Iron players to focus on mainly crosshair placement, make sure you have the optimal settings, and to just play a lot of comp. Valorant makes it easy to climb out of Iron, so as long as you play a lot, you should definitely climb out of Iron. As for bronze players, I'd also say focus on crosshair placement and also try to do a little aim training in order for your aim to be ready for silver lobbies. because in silver lobbies, they're pretty good silvers, and sometimes you need to have good aim to be able to compete with them. In silver lobbies, your aim should at least be decent, so the next thing to work on is probably game sense and making sure that you aren't holding dumb angles or missing out on smart tactics. For gold players, it's a little bit tricky because some gold players have like aim level of diamond players but have bad game sense, or the other way around. So I recommend trying to find where your strengths and weaknesses are and try to mainly focus on your weaknesses and practice those, and you should be able to climb to plat. In plat, if you haven't been practicing your aim too much, you'll probably run into something called a mechanical barrier, and this is where you cannot rank up because the enemy is just simply has better aim than you, and you can't really do much to against your opponent. At this point, you should probably try practicing your flicking and tracking in order to try and perfect your aim and climb to diamond. Those are all the tips I can give because I'm currently in diamond. So hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, subscribe, see you in the next one.